I mean, people have an overall perception problem of the city of Cleveland. My question is this: how can you tie in the tech initiative? How can you tie in leadership? How can you tie in regionalism, and far as get away from the whole negative perception of the city? For us, where you have all these positive things going on, and sell it to the mainstream for us, the people in northeastern Ohio.
Comment on that, and I'll be brief because it's one of my biggest pet peeves, though, and I think that people who live in Cleveland who have often, this is a generalization, but who have not lived somewhere else, or people who come from somewhere else and come back to Cleveland, I think we realize what a great city it is. We realize what all the assets we are that we have here. I mean, if you've lived in Chicago, or you've lived in New York, or you've lived in Memphis, or the Research Triangle, there are many other things that those cities have that are wonderful, but they don't necessarily have all of the assets that we have. So I think all of us can be great ambassadors for our city ourselves by word of mouth, and by when you talk to people in other communities, talking up Cleveland and saying how wonderful it is and how much you like being here. I think sometimes we are our worst enemies and we do a disservice. I can't tell you how many young people I talk to that have lived in Cleveland their entire lives and worked in Cleveland, and they just cannot wait to get out of Cleveland. And I'm not exactly sure what they're looking for, but I think I grew up here and I left and I came back. I think people who leave and come back, or who came from somewhere else, you realize all the resources that you have here, and I think we all just need to be better champions for our own community.
I think that's partly what the Fund for Economic Future is wrestling with. Foundations didn't necessarily want to take the leadership role in trying to bring everyone together to sing Kumbaya, but it kind of turned out that way. And to a couple of the comments that have already been made, when we talk about the R word, regionalism, I think far too often the defense mechanism goes up, and because people think, as April mentioned earlier, that it's going to all boil down to regional government. Well, let's try regional cooperation for a couple years before we even get to regional government, and governance. And that just requires that we all, realize that we're in it together, not to use a cliche, but I mean, we are all connected in some form or fashion. We should care as much about the suburban and exurban areas as we care about the urban core, and the interdependence that we all have on each other, and really celebrate the fact that there is something special here. April's exactly right. I hear it all the time from people, I just can't wait to get out of Cleveland. But many people leave and come back and realize, wow, it wasn't the grass wasn't as green on the other side as I thought it would be. But no matter where you are, no matter where you sit, you can play a leadership role and an ambassador role in helping people to remain excited about the place.
I guess one of my many frustrations about Cleveland is that when people, especially elected officials, talk about Cleveland, if they're from the city of Cleveland, they really focus on what's going on within the city boundaries as opposed to playing that ambassadorial role. There's a time for talking about the region and how the city, Cleveland, is the center of the region and all of the region's vibrancy and its assets. And then there's a different time for talking about particular issues that might be affecting a neighborhood or a city. And I never hear, I guess, the elected officials talking about how their city is anchoring this vibrant region. And that's what you would see more of in other geographies.
I think that's important for not just the city of Cleveland proper, but for the suburbs on the east and the west and the south to remember as well, because I hear people say, "Oh, I never go downtown. There's no reason for me to go downtown." Well, as the city goes, so goes the region. So I think all of us have to realize, even if we don't live in the city of Cleveland, which I do, that the downtown and the core urban area is very important for the region, and if it is not strong, and if we don't start to if we don't continue to support it with resources, it impacts the entire region, the suburbs, as well as the urban core, and all of the businesses as well.
We've been talking a lot about regionalism, just a fact. I'm not sure we're direct to your question, but it's obvious how important it is to all of us. And agreed. I mean, we're an eclectic mix, a mosaic of assets across Northeast Ohio. But Moody's did an interesting favor to all of us recently. They suggested across the board in this country, municipal bond ratings are going down. They didn't, for the first time, say it was going to be urban centers or first-ring suburbs. They said across the board. If that's not a sort of reason to get in the same room and start talking about what is good about us and what are the assets that we should support. One thing I sort of was hitting on the state earlier, but one thing I think they're doing well is they're forcing the state regions to look at their centers of excellence, whether it's wind power in Northwest Ohio and bioscience, biomed in Northeast Ohio and agribusiness in Southwest Ohio. Good for them. They're suggesting for once we're going to make targeted investments rather than the old sort of naive anywhere in Ohio as long as it's in Ohio, which spread this community too thin.
You all spoke about the exciting groundswell and influx of innovation and entrepreneurism, and what I think is one of the most exciting things about that is the number of instances that I see the city's very youngest residents, the 20-somethings and even teenagers, getting into this. So when you four sit around so many of these tables that are redefining and dictating the future of this city, how often are you looking at the faces of these 20-somethings? Is the city taking advantage of the energy, the excitement, the passion, and the vision of these young emerging generation?
The sister of the person who just held the mic came to our office recently with her class from Gilmore and said, we've organized a syllabus around why Cleveland. And it's funny because I was with a high school class in Beechwood, a high school class in Solon, a high school class with Gilmore, all with the same syllabus, which is why choose Cleveland. They're getting high school students involved in the civic discussion at a teenage level, like you said. And to me, that's extraordinary, and that's pretty new. And the point is these teachers are realizing that there's not necessarily the chance they're getting these high school students back after college unless they indoctrinate them now to the glories of this town.
I was just going to say, I just want to put another plug in for Hawken, because I think it's great that one of the independent schools, and that's where my kids go to school, but I think Scott Looney is a phenomenal headmaster, and I think he really gets education, and he is saying, we don't want to just teach our kids facts. We need to teach them to be citizens of our world. And part of that is being a part of the urban core and looking at our cities and how that impacts our, our country and our world. And so not just saying, let's go out and build campuses out further and further and further and further, from the urban core, but saying, let's take our kids back downtown. Let's take them back to the urban core and learn about our institutions in the urban core and why it is so important for it to thrive, that we all thrive. And so, that's just another opportunity to talk to young kids and entrepreneurs about why the city is important.
Yeah, from our perspective, in the perspective of the entrepreneurial development organizations, we see probably 20 to 25% of our companies that are connected in some way to research that's coming out of one of our local institutions that usually involves a significant number of graduate students or postdoctoral fellows. And so you see a lot of those individuals that have the entrepreneurial energy now connecting to the resources that the community has invested in to see if they've got the makings of a business.
And I'll just add, I think we all should be as open as we can possibly be to talking to young people that have an interest in doing anything in the city. I speak to a lot of high school classes and a lot of college classes, and April and I were talking recently about the tough thing about that is that you always get the calls afterwards where people want to meet with you one-on-one, and it becomes a very challenging kind of a time commitment, but I have actually spent a lot of time one-on-one just hearing what people have to say, hearing what their ideas are. I had a meeting 3 weeks ago with a 20-something-year-old urban radio jock who decided that he wanted to really do something big with the whole green economy piece. And he asked me if I would be on his show. So last night I was on his show talking about the green economy in Cleveland and the potential for Cleveland to do something really big. He's a 20-something-year-old guy that said, well, I never thought I could get a vice president on my show. But, I think it just goes to show, again, what I think makes Cleveland great. We all make the time, and we should, if we aren't, to listen to young people and be supportive of their energy and their, whatever efforts they have to change the course of our city.
At the City Club of Cleveland today, we've been listening to a panel discussion with April Boise, Randell McShepard, Ronayne, and Baiju Shah. Thank you, panel, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.